Guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I have yet another movie review for you all. This movie is an adventure from Denmark, Danish language English subs, released in the year 2019, directed by Fenar Ahmed, and this film is called Valhalla. So Valhalla is set in Norse mythology. You've got this family that live in a rural farmland, a mother, a father, a young daughter and a young son. They live a very peaceful life, but that peaceful life is about to be interrupted one day when a young girl is playing with some rocks, and that accidentally introduces the Nordic gods into their lives. So Thor and Loki descend upon Earth, and these mortals don't know what's going on. They're absolutely terrified, but it turns out that the mortals and the gods are going to be just as important to each other because they have to team up to prevent Ragnarok. Now, there are some very evil beings known as the giants, and if these giants get their hands on something that is roaming the countryside that I'm not going to give away, it's going to cause Ragnarok, basically the end of existence. And so the gods are in disarray. They're not really cooperating with each other, but these mortals have to try and show them what family is if they are to actually prevent this disaster from happening. So whether or not they can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on Valhalla. Ever since I was a child, I loved Nordic mythology. I love the idea of Thor, Loki, Odin, and all that kind of stuff. So I used to read up on it so much, and it was just something that I found so interesting, and I never really lost that interest. But then movies such as Thor Ragnarok, these mega budget Hollywood films have become a very big disappointment to me. It's because, yes, it is using the idea of Norse mythology, but it gets lost in translation, the culture difference. It just doesn't feel like a genuine Norse mythology movie. It's a movie that ultimately wants to make money, and that money element really gets in the way of the culture. So I'm really disappointed by those movies. It just doesn't really quench the thirst I have for Nordic mythology. So coming into Valhalla, I thought this is the perfect recipe to quench that thirst. This is Nordic mythology made by a Nordic country, and so they really understand this, and I thought that the culture difference wouldn't be an element. Therefore, I thought as though I found something that I could really, really enjoy. But unfortunately, although the movie is very serviceable and it is watchable, I thought as though there was a strong level of disappointment, which is something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I loved about Valhalla was that the special effects were used very, very well. This is a higher budget movie, but it's not a mega budget movie. And so the special effects are used very, very intelligently. You don't necessarily see everything that's going on, but that makes it even better. And so I thought as though, although this was a bigger budget movie, it was still a much more personal film than the likes of Thor Ragnarok with Chris Hemsworth and all those kinds of movies, is that it is about special effects, but it gets lost in that special effects, whereas Valhalla, it felt like a more personable film. And so that's something I really liked. I thought the special effects were very good, and that was very surprising, is that I wasn't expecting such a good looking film. And this is a movie that is draped in mythology. It feels like a different dimension. It feels like a different world, and this is exactly what you want. You don't want a movie that is set in a world where you could really relate to, because this is not relatable. This is about the gods. And so I thought as though the caricature nature was evident, and the caricature nature was very consistent in tone, and that's what I really liked about it. It actually felt like a Nordic film paying tribute to the Nordic mythology that this movie is based on. And so you do have the usual suspects such as Odin, Thor, Loki, and you've got their attributes that you would associate with these gods, but then you've got the mortals, and when these mortals interact with the gods, they're starting to learn things of each other. And so I thought, okay, well, that was fairly neat, is that although you're a mere mortal, you can still learn things off people that you're a lot more powerful than. And so that, I thought that was an interesting element that doesn't really play a driving effect, but it's there for interesting value. And so that was good. And I thought the acting was okay. It doesn't really have too much to play on, and I thought as though the adventure quality of the movie was there, so that was all very good. But the reason why I was a little bit disappointed with this movie is that I thought as though it was dumbed down for a very young audience, in that the characters don't really have anything going for them. Yes, they're named Thor, they're named Loki, but they don't have a very interesting aspect to their particular characters. And so you're told that they're Thor, you're told that they're Loki, but they don't really sell it as much as far as these godlike figures are concerned. I never felt as though they were magnificent. I didn't feel as though this movie had any grandeur to it. Is that I felt as though it's like you're coming home to a welcome home party. You're expecting a brass band. You're expecting a ticket fair sort of parade. But then you come home and you just see on the wall it's welcome home. And so you feel as though, okay, well, that was a bit of an anticlimax. And so that's the feeling I got with Valhalla, is that I thought this is a movie about Nordic mythology, the Nordic gods. But although, the mainstream films, I think, go over the top with the grandeur, I thought this movie lacked that grandeur to make it an overall piece that I thought hit really hard. I thought as though it didn't have the power of the gods. This is a movie that was draped in the power of the mere mortals. And so it just didn't have that grandeur that I thought could really appeal to a really wide audience. This is a movie that appeals to definitely a younger audience. I thought the violence in the movie was very tame, which is something that I can appreciate. Not everything has to be violent, but it was tame to a point where I thought, as I said, it is a very young audience that this movie is targeted to. And so basically this is a movie depicting a very popular subject, but the only way that this movie is going to last in the memory is that if you're not Danish, you're going to say, oh yeah, remember that superhero, remember that Nordic mythology film that was in subtitles. And so that's the only way you're going to differentiate this film from the usual film, is that it didn't have that grandeur to last in its own sort of content. It's just something that I believe is going to be directed at a very young audience in Denmark or Scandinavia in general, because these young people in English-speaking countries are not going to want to read subtitles. So I definitely think this is a film that's going to appeal more to a localized younger audience as opposed to a foreign audience, because as far as an adult is concerned, I just didn't really have a lot of guts and glory. I felt as though the characters were very downplayed. Thor, it just didn't give the impression that these were gods, and I didn't really get the impression that the stakes were high and that things were very risky. I didn't get any sense of fear. I didn't get any sense of suspense, but it does have that adventure quality, and the adventure quality really reminded me of Lord of the Rings. There are moments that I thought the soundtrack reminded me of Lord of the Rings, and so it's kind of the spin-off on Lord of the Rings, but it's adding a Nordic sort of mythology take to it. And so it is a movie that just doesn't have that grandeur that it really needed. It needed the power of the gods, but unfortunately has the power of mere mortals, and that prevents it from being an outstanding film. But it is watchable, it's serviceable, and if you are younger and you want to get into Norse mythology without, there's absolutely spectacular special effects that take over a story, then I definitely think Valhalla is worth at least one viewing. But it just, as I said, it just doesn't have that memorable quality. When you've got a film that the most memorable quality is the fact that it's spoken in Danish, you do have a problem. And so ultimately, I just don't think it achieved its goal completely. So overall, for Valhalla, I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars. It's definitely not a bad movie. It's very well made. There is a lot of love put into it. I just don't think it has the grandeur to really set itself apart from the rest. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you there.